My name is Jennifer. I'm 31 years old, and what began as an ordinary family barbecue in our suburban Atlanta backyard turned into a moment that none of us would ever forget. The afternoon was warm and familiar, filled with the smell of grilled meat, clinking plates, and easy laughter as relatives gathered around picnic tables. In the middle of it all, I smiled at my Uncle Christopher and thanked him for the birthday gift he had sent me a month earlier. It was a simple $3 silver keychain with a tiny star charm, nothing flashy or expensive, but I genuinely cherished it because it came from him. I held up my keys and joked that I carried it everywhere. That was when the atmosphere shifted. Uncle Christopher slowly set his plate down, the background chatter fading, as if someone had turned down the volume on the entire backyard. He looked directly at me, calm yet unmistakably serious, and said that he hadn't just sent me a keychain. He explained that he had bought me a $600,000 apartment downtown, and that the keychain was merely a complimentary freebie from the realtor. His words hit like a shockwave. Amanda's phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto her plate. Susan froze mid-bite before spilling red punch across the white tablecloth, and David's face drained as he gripped the table like the ground had suddenly shifted beneath him. Even little Brandon stopped chasing bubbles and stared at the adults, sensing that something enormous had just happened. 1 second earlier, everyone had been laughing, passing ribs and coleslaw. The next, silence swallowed the entire backyard. No one spoke. No one moved, only wide eyes and shallow breaths remained. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, or experienced a moment when one unexpected truth changed everything, you'll want to stay with this story. Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because what happened next only made things more unbelievable. To get why that revelation felt like a gut punch right in the middle of our barbecue, let's rewind to how the afternoon started. The backyard in suburban Atlanta hummed with that effortless Saturday rhythm, sunlight slanting through the oaks, while smoke spiraled from the charcoal grill carrying the unmistakable Georgia bite of hickory smoke and slow-cooked ribs. Neighborhood kids tore across the grass in a chaotic soccer game, their yells mingling with the sharp hiss of soda tabs popping open and the occasional splash from a sprinkler they kept running through. Dad held court at the grill apron, tied tight, turning burgers and ribs with steady flips, his voice carrying over the crackle as he shouted for everyone to line up before the meat dried out. Susan moved with practiced grace between the table and the ice chest, setting out her signature sides, creamy coleslaw shining in the sun-baked beans, bubbling in their dish corn on the cob, slathered in butter, arranging everything so it looked magazine-ready for these gatherings. Amanda, my 20-year-old half-sister, claimed a spot on the picnic bench in her fresh sundress, phone propped up as she framed shots of the food, and her own smile for Instagram, swiping filters on in seconds to keep the feed looking polished. Brandon, my 5-year-old son, stayed within arm's reach, pushing a red toy truck through dirt patches, pausing now and then to look up at me with a grin or chase after a stray ball from the older kids. Uncle Christopher had pulled in from Texas unannounced, his rental still parked at an angle in the driveway, and he eased into a lawn chair with the easy posture of someone who had just come back from months away, plate already loaded as he surveyed the yard. Cousin Nicole, his daughter, settled right beside me, iced tea in hand, her calm presence cutting through the bustle as she joined the conversation without effort. Talk rolled along smoothly at first, Dad pressing Uncle Christopher for details on the European cities he'd visited while the ribs caramelized just right. Susan asking about unfamiliar dishes that might spark her next kitchen experiment. Amanda tilted her phone toward Nicole to show a story she had just posted, drawing a quick laugh about college life trends. I cut a small piece of burger for Brandon, wiping his hands as the group passed ketchup and plates, the afternoon feeling almost ordinary in its warmth. Then Uncle Christopher turned to me, his voice dropping just enough to carve out a private space amid the noise. "You've always been the strong one in this family, Jennifer. Stronger than most people realize." The words settled over me quietly, carrying real weight. Thanks, Uncle Christopher. Coming from you, that means a lot. He nodded once, eyes steady. I mean it. Not everyone shows up the way you do. A faint current moved through the table. Dad cleared his throat sharply louder than the moment called for. Susan's gaze darted to Amanda in a quick, loaded glance. Amanda's thumb hesitated on her screen, the easy curve of her smile stiffening for a beat. Nicole watched without speaking, her expression calm but attentive. The change was subtle, like the first cool breeze before a storm front arrives. The kids kept running and shouting in the yard, completely unaware, but around our plates, the easy flow stuttered. Dad prodded the coals even though they didn't need it. Susan straightened a bowl that was already aligned. Amanda scrolled with sudden intensity. That familiar prickle started at the base of my neck, the quiet warning that something solid was about to crack open beneath the surface of this ordinary barbecue afternoon. Living in this family always made me feel like I was on the outside looking in, even at barbecues like this one. Mom died when I was 8, a sudden heart attack that left the house quiet and Dad lost. 2 years later, he married Susan, and she stepped in with clear rules about priorities. Amanda came along soon after their daughter, and from her first cry, she became the center everything revolved around. Susan arranged play dates, enrolled her in dance classes before she could tie her shoes, and Dad nodded along, saying this was how you build confidence in a child. I learned early that my needs came second, framed as character-building opportunities. By 16, the pattern was set in stone. Amanda walked out to the driveway on her birthday to find a brand-new SUV wrapped in a giant bow, Dad handing her the keys with a proud grin, because she needs reliable transportation for school and activities. I turned 16 the following spring and mentioned needing a car to get to my part-time job at the library. Susan suggested I borrow her minivan when it wasn't in use for Amanda's recitals or sleepovers, which turned out to be never, since the calendar filled with her commitments first. Dad agreed it would teach me responsibility to save up myself. College widened the divide into something impossible to ignore. Amanda targeted Ivy League schools, her applications polished with private tutors Susan hired and fees paid without discussion. When acceptances rolled in, Dad unlocked a dedicated trust fund he had quietly built for her education, full tuition, housing, even semester abroad programs in Europe. Susan sat up nights reviewing essays and calling alumni contacts for recommendations. I started at community college to keep costs down, transferred to a state university for my teaching credential, and covered the rest with federal loans that now total over $30,000 at rates that eat into my monthly paycheck long after graduation. No trust fund existed for me. Dad explained we had to allocate resources where they were most needed, meaning Amanda's ambitions were investments, while mine were luxuries we could postpone. As a single mom, after Brandon's father disappeared the moment the pregnancy test turned positive, the imbalance cut deeper. I took weekend tutoring jobs at public libraries across Atlanta, charging $12 an hour to coach middle schoolers in algebra and reading comprehension. Every session's earnings funneled straight into daycare costs or secondhand winter coats that still fit the next year. Susan never offered to watch Brandon during those hours. Her schedule stayed packed with Amanda's sorority events, internship interviews, lined up through family, friends, and weekend trips to visit campuses. Amanda flew to Paris one summer on Dad's credit card, posting photos from cafes and museums, while I calculated grocery budgets down to the cent and skipped my own birthday dinners to make rent. Dad dropped by once a month with a small toy for Brandon, stayed exactly 30 minutes, then left with a pat on the shoulder and a promise to call soon that rarely materialized. When I asked for help covering a sick day so I could stay home with Brandon during a fever, the response was polite regret. Work was busy. Susan had prior commitments with Amanda's college orientation. I swallowed my pride at every family gathering, repeating to myself that independence was my strength, the one asset no one could claim or diminish, even as Amanda's road stayed paved and mine remained cracked asphalt underfoot. The only one who truly saw through that was Uncle Christopher. Last year, his heart condition turned serious. Doctors found severe blockages that required immediate bypass surgery and a long recovery period filled with cardiac rehab and strict monitoring. The news came on a Tuesday afternoon via a shaky phone call from his neighbor in Texas, who found him collapsed in the kitchen. I dropped everything. Starting that week, I rearranged my teaching schedule, packed Brandon's favorite toys and snacks, and drove the 4-hour stretch from Atlanta to his house every Tuesday and Friday after school dismissed. Those round trips ate up entire evenings. I-20 traffic, unpredictable construction zones slowing everything to a crawl. But I arrived each time with homemade soup in a cooler, his pill organizer refilled, and a calm presence so he could rest without worry. Brandon sat in the hospital waiting area with his coloring books and action figures occasionally peeking through the door to wave at Uncle Christopher hooked to monitors. I helped with physical therapy walks down sterile hallways, tracked his blood pressure readings, and stayed overnight on the pull-out couch when the fatigue left him too weak to manage alone. The promotion I had been eyeing at school, lead teacher for the gifted program, slipped away because the principal needed someone who could stay late for parent conferences and curriculum planning without notice. I couldn't guarantee that with the drives. Dad cited endless work deadlines at his office in Atlanta, claiming projects couldn't wait. Susan said she was buried in Amanda's college applications, campus tours, essay revisions, scholarship forms that demanded her full attention. Amanda herself was too overwhelmed with senior year stress and final exams to travel or help. I never pushed for assistance. I simply kept going. Cousin Nicole drove over from Dallas whenever her schedule allowed, bringing fresh produce, sitting with Uncle Christopher during my quick grocery runs, or taking Brandon to the hospital cafeteria for ice cream so I could focus. One evening, while Uncle Christopher rested after a long therapy session, Nicole borrowed his phone to set a reminder for his next appointment and scrolled into his messages. She found a chain of texts dated back to my visits, updates saying, "Everything's fine here, Uncle C. Brandon and I are good, don't stress. No need to worry about us, focus on getting stronger." The send times aligned perfectly with days I had been right there in the room with him. Nicole showed me the screenshots quietly in the hallway. Susan had taken my phone once under the excuse of needing to look up a doctor's number, then used it to send the messages herself. A deliberate effort to convince Uncle Christopher I was handling everything effortlessly so he wouldn't feel guilty or reach out to anyone else. The discovery landed like a quiet slap, not mere absence but calculated manipulation to keep the load squarely on my shoulders. Nicole didn't confront anyone then, but we exchanged a glance that carried the full weight of understanding. Uncle Christopher gradually strengthened after the surgery, his color returning, his steps steadier with each passing month. One quiet night in his living room, Brandon curled asleep between us on the couch. He gripped my hand with more force than he'd had in weeks, and spoke plainly. He had rewritten his will months earlier, redirecting assets that once defaulted to Dad. Now fully cleared by his cardiologist to resume normal life, he moved forward with a concrete plan. He searched Atlanta listings, settled on a 2-bedroom condo in a secure downtown building near my school and Brandon's daycare. Good schools, tree-lined streets, walking distance to parks. He paid in cash, had the deed transferred solely to my name through his lawyer, and kept the details private until he could deliver the news himself. That choice stemmed directly from watching me arrive week after week, when excuses came easily to others, and from recognizing the long-standing patterns that had quietly marginalized me for decades. He never brought up the fabricated messages, but Nicole and I carried the knowledge between us, a silent confirmation that genuine support looks very different from what I'd grown used to accepting. A few months after his recovery, as Uncle Christopher traveled Europe, my birthday passed quietly. Too quietly. A modest package showed up from Paris with the familiar European postmark wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with string. Inside was the $3 keychain, a delicate silver chain holding a small star charm that glinted under my apartment light. and a short handwritten note folded beneath it. Just a little something to hold you over until the real gift arrives. All my love, Uncle Christopher. I slipped the chain onto my keys right away, the charm swinging lightly as I moved through the kitchen, a small token of thoughtfulness amid the daily grind. The actual birthday unfolded with almost no notice. David texted at 9:47 p.m. "Happy birthday. Hope the day treated you well," followed by Susan's message an hour later with a single cake emoji and nothing else. Amanda dropped a quick story reply with a heart and "Happy B-Day sis" emoji chain. No call, no card, no suggestion to meet for coffee or cake. Brandon and I shared a single cupcake after his bedtime story. I blew out the candle while he clapped, his small face lit by the flame, but the silence from the rest of the family lingered like an empty chair at the table. Amanda's Instagram, on the other hand, told a completely different narrative. Her stories flooded my feed that week with glimpses of a stunning downtown Atlanta apartment, expansive windows framing the city skyline, at dusk sleek gray furniture positioned perfectly, a kitchen island gleaming with fresh flowers. Captions read, "Loving my new city pad," and "Finally feeling settled." Each post polished with filters that made the space look straight out of a magazine. The place screamed luxury: high ceilings, modern art on the walls, a balcony view of the park, far beyond what a college student's part-time job or allowance typically afforded. I tapped the heart on her story out of reflex, adding a quick, "Looks amazing" comment without pausing to think, assuming she had scored some ideal house-sitting arrangement through Susan's extensive network of friends and colleagues. The irony didn't hit me then. My mind stayed occupied with grading stacks of essays, planning Brandon's next school project, and stretching the grocery budget through another week. A few evenings later, with Brandon already asleep, I dialed Uncle Christopher's international number during a rare, quiet moment. The connection crackled across the ocean, but his voice came through clear and warm. "How's Europe treating you?" I asked, running my thumb over the star charm on my keys. He laughed lightly. "Paris was magic, Italy next. Pasta and wine every day. But tell me, did the package arrive?" "It did," I replied. "The keychain is lovely. Thank you for remembering me while you're out there seeing the world." "That little thing." His tone turned playful, carrying a hint of excitement. "It's nothing compared to what's waiting. Your real gift will blow your mind when I get back. Trust me, it's going to change everything for you and Brandon." I smiled into the receiver, imagining him on a sunlit terrace somewhere. "You're keeping me in suspense, Uncle Christopher. Don't make me wait forever." He chuckled again. "Patience, sweetheart. It'll be worth every second. Just keep that keychain close. It's only the beginning of something much bigger." We talked a little longer about his travels, the narrow streets of Rome, the way the light hit the Seine at sunset. And when we hung up, I sat in the dim living room staring at the star charm, a quiet thread of anticipation weaving through the usual exhaustion of single mom routines. Amanda's posts continued rolling in. More photos of the apartment's cozy reading nook, a coffee table stacked with books, the skyline glowing at night. Each one more enviable than the last. I scrolled past them without suspicion, focused on tomorrow's lesson plans and Brandon's upcoming field trip permission slip. Uncle Christopher's hint stayed in the back of my mind, a subtle promise amid the ordinary days, but I had no clue how soon the full picture would emerge, or how sharply it would cut when it finally did. Sitting there at the barbecue table with the smell of ribs still in the air, Uncle Christopher's words changed everything. He placed his plate down with deliberate care and fixed his gaze on me. "Jennifer, I didn't send you a keychain. I bought you a $600,000 apartment downtown Atlanta. The keychain was just a freebie from the realtor." The statement hit like a physical force, draining color from every face at the table. Amanda's phone tumbled from her grip and landed on her plate with a sharp clatter. Susan's fork hovered then, her glass-tilted punch pooling across the cloth in a dark stain. Dad's hands clenched, the table-edge knuckles turning white as his expression shifted from confusion to pallor. Brandon paused his play on the grass, looking up with wide eyes at the sudden stillness. Uncle Christopher pressed on, his tone steady and unyielding. "I purchased the condo after my surgery, 2 bedrooms, prime location near your school, and Brandon's daycare, secure building in a good district. I paid cash and had the deed transferred solely to your name as gratitude for the 6 months you drove, 4 hours round trip twice a week, stayed overnight when I was too weak to manage alone, brought Brandon to appointments because you couldn't afford extra help." He let the details sink in his eyes, moving slowly from me to Dad, then Susan, then Amanda. "I told David my plan before I left for Europe. He was supposed to oversee the closing and keep it confidential until I returned." Dad's voice came out hoarse. "Christopher, we can explain. It was only temporary. Amanda needed a quiet place for college, her own space to study, a real kitchen instead of dorm food. We intended to find her something permanent soon." Susan leaned forward quickly. "We put thousands into it. Furniture, bedding, kitchen essentials to make it functional. Jennifer is so self-sufficient, she was handling her apartment fine. We planned to transfer it after Amanda finished school." Amanda's voice broke through in a sharp cry. "Mom promised it'd be mine forever. She said no one would take it away." The confession exploded into the open, raw, and unguarded. Nicole reached into her bag and laid printed emails on the table. "I have copies of the thank you letters you sent Uncle Christopher in Jennifer's name, the ones expressing how grateful she was for the apartment, how settled and happy she felt there. Except Jennifer never wrote a single word of them." She pushed the papers forward. "The dates line up exactly with the months you occupied the place. You forged them to keep Uncle Christopher from questioning why he wasn't hearing from her directly." Amanda's face collapsed into fresh tears. "Mom promised it'd be mine forever." Susan's defense rose sharply. "We weren't stealing. We borrowed it. Jennifer already had housing. Amanda needed it more for her studies. We thought we were helping everyone." Dad's plea followed. "Let's not destroy the barbecue over this. We can sit down and work something out." The justifications stacked up, each one thinner and more desperate than the last. Uncle Christopher shook his head. "You took a gift I bought specifically for Jennifer, paid with my money deeded in her name, and handed it to Amanda instead. You lied to me for months with fake letters and excuses." I felt the anger rise cold and clear. "Give me the keys, right now." Susan's hands trembled as she opened her purse. "We spent so much on decorations. We can't just—" "You spent money on property that never belonged to you," Nicole interrupted. "I have the purchase contract, the deed transfer, and copies of every forged letter. We can call a Georgia lawyer for property fraud if you prefer to handle it that way." Dad's face drained further. "Jennifer, think about Amanda. She's already started her semester from that address. Her whole routine is built around it." The sheer nerve struck hard. They had stolen my home, allowed her to settle in and build her life there, then expected me to accommodate the disruption. I stood up slowly. "The keys. Now." Susan fumbled, then placed the set on the table with shaking fingers. Uncle Christopher picked them up and handed them to me. I looked around at their faces, Dad staring at the ground, Susan calculating next moves, Amanda sobbing quietly. I wondered if anyone else had felt this kind of family betrayal, the kind that hits when you least expect it, shattering the illusion of fairness you'd clung to for years. I wasn't backing down this time. That afternoon, after the grill went cold, I headed to the apartment with Uncle Christopher and Nicole. The 20-minute drive downtown cut through Atlanta's afternoon traffic, the skyline rising sharp against the sky as we turned onto Peachtree Street. We parked in front of a sleek brick building with black shutters and window boxes spilling geraniums, the entrance framed by mature oaks that softened the urban edge. Uncle Christopher led us to the third-floor corner unit, turning the key with a quiet click. The door opened to bright open space, hardwood floors reflecting sunlight from floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a green park where kids climbed the playground equipment even as the day faded. The living area flowed seamlessly into a kitchen with crisp white cabinets, granite counters that caught the light, and cabinets already stocked with dishes and cookware still bearing tags. Susan's investments were unmistakable. A soft gray sectional dominating the living room, a solid wood coffee table centered perfectly, a dining set ready for 6 all arranged to make the place feel instantly lived in and welcoming. 2 bedrooms opened off a short hallway. Brandon's room had built-in shelves and east windows that promised morning sun ample space for his toys, and a bed already made with fresh sheets. The master bedroom offered breathing room, space for a dresser, a chair for reading after long days, and a walk-in closet larger than the curtained corner he'd slept in before. The bathroom featured a deep, soaking tub that beckoned after endless grading sessions. I moved through the room, slowly trailing my fingers along the counters, opening drawers to find utensils neatly organized, opening the balcony door to feel the breeze from the park below. Uncle Christopher stood in the doorway watching with quiet satisfaction. I viewed dozens of listings. This one stood out. Secure, convenient, a real home where you and Brandon can build memories. Nicole smiled beside him. You earned this after everything you gave. Brandon darted from room to room, claiming the couch as his dinosaur headquarters and pressing his face to the windows to watch the swings outside. My phone began vibrating insistently, David's name on the screen. I answered on speaker. Jennifer, please. Amanda is devastated. Can she stay through finals? We'll figure out the rest. I glanced at the park view, Brandon already unpacking his toy truck. No. She leaves this week. Personal items only. The furniture, linens, kitchen things, they stay. David pressed. Her routine is set here. Classes, study groups, everything. Don't disrupt her semester. Susan joined on the line, voice thick with tears. You're overreacting. Family forgives everything. We can make this right. Amanda's plea followed, small and desperate. Don't kick me out tonight. The dorm is horrible. Shared showers, loud neighbors. I can't focus like this. The old guilt tugged briefly, but I let it pass. You had no right to live there. It was never yours. David appeared at the door an hour later holding a small gift bag, chocolates and a card labeled peace offering, his face hopeful. I opened the door only a crack. This isn't fixed with candy. He tried. We made a mistake. Let us make amends. I closed the door softly. Uncle Christopher's lawyer handled the forgery swiftly. Misdemeanor under Georgia law, but the demand letter was enough. The family paid $5,000 in legal fees to settle quietly, the cost a tangible sting for their actions. Amanda packed that night, boxes loaded into Susan's car under the building's lights. She moved to dorms the next day, the transition abrupt and public. Nicole shared the full story with cousins and aunts, the truth spreading through Atlanta family circles faster than any excuse Susan offered. Invitations to gatherings dried up for David and Susan. Church events became awkward with sidelong glances. The immediate loss of reputation cut deep in our tight-knit community. I stood at the living room window as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Brandon playing dinosaurs on the sectional. The apartment already feeling like home. Solid, earned, and finally mine. 6 months later, everything has settled into a new normal in Atlanta. Teaching no longer feels like a constant scramble. Without rent draining my paycheck, I breathe easier, covering groceries and bills with room left for small joys, like weekend outings to the aquarium or new books for Brandon's shelf. He loves his school near the park. Teachers greet him by name, classmates invite him to birthday parties, and he bounds out of bed each morning eager for the day instead of clinging to the old cramped routine. The apartment has become our sanctuary. Brandon's dinosaurs command the built-in shelves in his sunlit room. Mornings start with coffee at the kitchen island. Evenings end with stories in the deep tub that soothes away the day's fatigue. Uncle Christopher drops by often, bringing stories from his latest trips and spoiling Brandon with little treasures, while Nicole remains a steady presence, checking in with calls and visits that feel genuine and uncomplicated. The difference from before is profound. No more measuring every dollar, no more bracing for gatherings where I felt like an afterthought. David and Susan live with the consequences every day. Amanda struggles in the dorms. Shared bathrooms that are never clean, roommates who blast music, late cafeteria meals she can't stomach. She took a part-time barista job near campus to afford extras, working weekends that steal study time, her grades dropping the next semester from exhaustion and lack of a quiet space to focus. David and Susan have faded from Atlanta family circles. Nicole ensured cousins and aunts heard the unfiltered truth, and invitations to church potlucks and holiday dinners vanished, replaced by awkward nods and empty seats at events. Uncle Christopher withdrew all financial and emotional support. Their world shrank without his quiet generosity. I blocked their numbers after the last pleading call, turned down every attempt to reconnect, chose peace over pretending. Stories like this show how family dynamics can change everything. Real family shows up when it counts, and I've learned to demand that for myself and Brandon. It's amazing how one barbecue can reveal so much about who really has your back. Thank you all for taking the time to watch the video. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos.